Good discussion, good discussion. I'm not going to give you the answer, by the way. I'm just going to keep going. Next statement. I understand better because I have God in my life and they don't. Confidence or pride? Pride. Sorry? Judgment. Okay. So all unanimously believe pride and judgment. Yeah? We have one contentious individual. Tell us, why do you think that could be perceived as confidence?
Because God as God's children, He has given us knowledge and wisdom which the world doesn't have. And while it can be if you look down on someone else, but if I'm just thankful that that is what God has given me, then it's confidence.
Thank you. So the fact that I'm thankful rather than judgmental. Power of words, by the way, because there's a distinction when you use very particular words like better. Next one. I am brilliant at what I do. Confidence or pride? Confidence. Oh, someone's grimacing over here. Nabil's like, oh. Okay, some confidence. Anyone pride?
I think the word brilliant is
Borderline pride. Why is it borderline? Or it's over-exaggerated, okay.
maybe just know you're brilliant. So
Maybe just know you're brilliant. That's just, it's not that deep. I learned that it's not that deep. That's how we ran an entire Unity session one day. Dylan was like, it's just not that deep. Strong, strong conclusions. Okay, so I will reveal in a second the definitions between confidence and pride. The reason I started with this is because there's a lot of different interpretations. And I think a lot of what it comes down to genuinely is usually the intention. So confidence, and I'm going to split it into two categories: how we define confidence in the world versus how we define confidence in the spiritual. Confidence, a belief in your own ability to do things and be successful. So I'm confident because I'm good at something. And we all think that, right? Like there's certain times where we say, I'm good at something, whatever the characteristic is. But confidence in a godly context, it's a belief in God's ability to do things and be successful. So everything we have in life is a gift. And it's a gift from God. Yes, He gives us those attributes and skills. But when I attribute it to myself is very different to when I say God has given it to me. And a lot of the examples I gave previously, any one of them could be stated if the sentence that follows afterwards is, thank God for having that. That's the key. Pride, on the other hand, a high opinion of one's worth or importance which gives rise to a feeling or attitude of superiority over others. Very common in the context of the world. Even worse yet, in a spiritual context, it's a high opinion of one's own worth or importance which gives rise to a feeling or attitude of superiority over God. And there's so many examples in the Bible about what that looks like. And I think the very obvious one is Adam and Eve. And I did put it in, but I thought let's not spend too much time about it. But in essence, the fall happened was because they thought they were greater than God. They thought they had dominion, they had autonomy, they could make decisions, even though He explicitly said not to. And I think the way that pride manifests in our life, we probably don't think about it in that context a lot, but if you take every small decisions or every fear or every doubt, it's often linked to the fact that we feel we have control or we know better than God does. And that's quite an uncomfortable truth if you sit with it. But also the cause of a lot of our issues, to be honest. Because if you really take any type of sin, to be honest, the root cause will often stem from pride. And we'll go into some of the mechanics on that. So I found this quote. I didn't know who Tony Dungy was until I literally Googled him on the way here. He's an NFL coach, but he's a Christian. And I really liked this quote. I thought it was very beautiful. So pride is all about me, but confidence is a realization that God has given me abilities and created me to fill a unique role that no one else is called to fill. So confidence is the idea that I know my purpose for what God has given me, and I am the only person on this planet who can uniquely fill this role. I think that kind of confidence you probably notice in people who walk around in life where they're just very assured. But if you lived by a definition like that, I think that's pretty beautiful. The pride component, which I think we are often, it's what's constantly being thrown at us in the world. It is all about me. It is all about my opinion. It's all about how I feel. It's all about the way that I think about life. It's all about my comfort zone. It's all about my needs. It's always about me. Why somebody's done wrong to me, why somebody didn't give me the thing that I want, why they didn't give me the praise. We live in a world that actually encourages me. That's often what we're bombarded with. But that's not our reality as Christians. Our reality is much greater than that. Like, our calling is big. And we have a responsibility because God gave us this gift. And that's how we should be walking in life, with that confidence and assuredness that He gave that to us. And that's a very, very peaceful existence. And not only that, but a very fulfilling one, because your purpose is very anchored in who He is and not in who I define myself to be or others. Any thoughts or reflections on that? Because I know we started with a lot of content. I'll always pause because I know there's things that people might be reflecting on. But if you do feel you want to raise a hand or you have questions, just please put your hand up. Okay, so to keep going into the theme of, well, what are the different characteristics that we would find in pride and confidence? I wanted to start with pride. Oh, I'm doing it on my laptop, assuming it's going to do that. So this is what pride looks like in me, right? So the whole purpose of today is let's think about us. So as we're going through all of these things, just think about where do I exhibit those things? So the first thing is this idea of believing that I am in control. So in his pride, the wicked does not seek him. In all his thoughts, there is no room for God. So when you're prideful, the way that you walk in life, you often don't really think about God very much because you think you're the one who is responsible for everything and your decisions and what you take, what steps. And I'm sure people who know me in this room know that I'm a bit of a control freak. It is something I'm continuously working on. But we naturally have a tendency, or at least I naturally have a tendency, that when there's a problem, I automatically go into fixing mode. It's like, what's the solutions? How do I do it? What are the things I need to think about? And there's like a very quick succession planning in my head of all the steps I need to take. And the truth is, in that moment, I'm not leaving any room for him. I just go straight into functioning, solutioning ideas. And that's not really what we should be doing. So that's prideful to some extent. And it might even be small things that you don't realize, but even when something really goes wrong or you're struggling and you start going into how do I fix this, or even going into despair to some extent, the assumption there is you're the one who's going to fix it. Rather than trying to understand, well, one, why am I going through this problem? And two, just praying. And prayer is powerful, and I'm sure you've heard it a million times, but step one should always be pray. It should always be step one. But unfortunately, step one, at least for me, is always, what am I going to do about it? Second one is believing I'm above others is also a concept of pride. So one of the ones we talked earlier about, I'm better than other people. So for everyone who exalts himself will be humbled, and he who humbles himself will be exalted. So pride in the fact that we think we are better than other people happens a lot. And I think the way that manifests itself, I think judgment is a really easy one. You might not even realize you're doing it, but something or someone might do something, and instinctively your thought is like, why are they doing that? Or don't they know that's wrong? And we're really in no position to judge. That's the reality of the matter. None of us are clean. None of us have a blank slate. None of us have the authority to make a judgment. But it is so easy to fall into that. And trust me, again, I do it all the time. At work, if I receive a document or something, and I'm like, but why don't they know how to do this? It's that simple. And I'm begrudgingly, and it seems like a small comment, but then those things add up. Because in your head, you start thinking you're better than other people. Like, if you give me 5 minutes, I would have done that 10 times better. But then you're also, in that particular example, you're robbing people from the opportunity to learn. Because you've already judged them and made the decision that they're not worth your time. That where they could potentially learn from you, you've already decided they're not worthy because they're just not good enough. That judgment plays itself in many different ways, and I'm never going to be able to know what it's in people's heart, but it's something that's really difficult. And even sometimes when I think about concepts of injustice, where I see somebody doing something wrong and I'm like, that's just wildly wrong, why would you do that? My heart wants to fight, but then at the same time, it's not really for me to judge. I don't know what the circumstances of that person is or how they came to that conclusion or why they're in that situation. You don't know. We never know. And judgment assumes knowledge, which we just don't have, and it's never complete and it never will be. And the only person who has that is God. So this is an easy one and one to really watch out for because you don't even notice it's happening. But every time you feel a nerve or you feel like that fire, you get annoyed at something, just ask yourself, why am I getting annoyed? And why am I making that judgment? Because that's probably the place to look at, not the person you're judging. Next one. Dealing with criticism. The way of a fool is right in his own eyes, but he who heeds counsel is wise. Not too far linked from the previous one. If you're really good at something and someone comes and criticizes you, and you're like, but I know best. And you don't take that criticism on board. And again, as I use a work context, because it's quite neutral. Get feedback from a manager or from a junior person, and you say, I disagree with that. Even if you disagreed with that, if you sit with yourself and you say, let me think about the fact as to why they've said that, there might be something to learn. But if you're constantly putting yourself in a position where you don't take on any form of feedback, that can be really problematic. Now, I'm not suggesting that sometimes feedback feels unwarranted, because sometimes it can be. And sometimes people say things and you feel like it's unjust. But I think even within that, to still sit with yourself and ask the questions, why did they ask that? Even if at that moment, actually, you realize that they're the ones who are hurting or they're the ones that are struggling, then you can help them. But if your inability to even hear the criticism, you can't even get to that stage because you've already fired yourself up and you're shutting down and you're like, I don't want to listen. And the word foolish is a strong one. You don't want to be walking in life as foolish. And the idea to open your eyes and your ears and your heart to whatever's being said, you might find, even if it's a small nugget of information that can actually pertain to you, even if it's not the whole paragraph or the sentence or whatever it is. But to have the ability to be able to hear that. And again, very easy thing to fall into. So something we just need to always be mindful of. When somebody, again, criticizes you or says something wrong against you, just take a minute and take a breath. Is there a reason why they're saying that? False humility. This is a strong one. So, saint, not biblical, but he says, some are humble in speech, but proud in heart. What do people think false humility looks like? You both did the exact same thing at the same time. So they both did this. This is cultural for a lot of people who don't know that. But this idea that you walk around in a way where you're like, no, can't possibly be me. It's definitely not me. Where they kind of have this pretense of, I can't possibly do that. I'm not worthy enough within God's eyes. The thing about false humility is, in some ways, you're actually taking God's glory. So if God gives you talents and God gives you something and you don't use it because you say, no, I'm unworthy, you're actually not capitalizing on the thing that he's given you, and you need to and you should. It's a calling. And sometimes people feel like they have to show this false humility because it means that, I don't know, they're perceived better or there's a way you should behave. But the irony of worrying too much about how I should look like is you actually waste time from actually doing the thing you should be doing. You're too busy trying to put the persona of that. And again, I'm guilty of that. And I think we probably all have elements of that in our life where you shy or you hide away from things, masking it as humility because you don't actually have the confidence to live a life that God's called you to do, or to behave in a particular way, or to do a certain thing. And this one's a tricky one because I think it's hard to catch sometimes. But I almost link, and this is Tina's correlation, so please don't take it as causation. But false humility is linked to insecurity. You often don't want to do things because there's an inherent insecurity in yourself that you're trying to mask. But if you really know your abilities and you know how to handle them, obviously with the mindset that God's given that to me, it's a rare occasion that you move into that. And it is a concept of pride in and of itself. Because of that reasoning, because you say, I am not going to do the thing that God's called me to do, I've made the decision that I'm going to step away from that, but I'm going to mask it as I'm trying to be humble. So that in and of itself is something to think about, because it might look like it is, but it's not. Example in the Bible, who is this man? To guess who? Saul. King Saul. Why did I use King Saul as the example? Because of David? Yeah. I mean, hold that thought. Anybody want to tell me why I use Saul as the example to follow pride?
He didn't obey, and when he was challenged, he accused everybody else rather than himself.
Yeah, Saul is the archetype of pride, I think. He was the first king, but he had a mighty fall. And we were just even reading, trying to find like really strong examples of that. But to Nabil's point, he really valued his own judgment over God's. And there's a lot of examples where he's done that. And one that I did find was around him sparing Agag when they told him to kill the Amalekites. And he still decided to hold on to him, even though he shouldn't have. And Samuel, I really feel for him throughout the stories, because I think he really tried hard with him, but he was a very stubborn man. And the Lord said, he said, I greatly regret that I've set up Saul as king, for he has turned back from following me and has not preferred my commandments. And it grieved Samuel, and he cried out to the Lord all night. He also really had an issue when it came to trusting himself over God. There was a lot of examples, but a couple that I pulled out. So the burnt offering, I don't know if you know the story. But because he feared losing control, Samuel had just basically given him authority to become king. And he said, wait for when I return, and then we will do the burnt offering. He decided he was going to do it anyway. The consequences of that, he said, only fear the Lord and serve him in truth with all your heart, for consider what great things he has done for you. But if you still do wickedly, you shall be swept away, both you and your king. He also craved a lot of praise, and he really feared losing status. So when David was getting a lot of praise, he was very upset. And I think the idea that, and we'll come to David, David was a very humble man, and he did a lot for Saul. And he really tried to plot to get rid of him many, many times. This was a man in stature. This was a man who was a king. And this is the thing, they say how the mighty fall, like the higher you go, the higher your fall becomes. But that height doesn't come from status. That comes from pride. There are many people who are in very high positions that can keep humility. But if you really struggle to do that, then yes, your fall will be great. And I don't have to say it, but Christ is the most beautiful example of that. You can have both of those things at the same time. So the moral of the story is don't be like Saul. So that's pride. What does confidence look like? So the first thing that we have is around understanding and knowing who God is. So I'm going to read this. So thus says the Lord, let not the wise man glory in his wisdom. Let not the mighty man glory in his might. Nor let the rich man glory in his riches, but let him who glorifies glory in this, that he understands and knows me, that I am the Lord, exercising loving kindness, judgment, and righteousness in the earth. For in these I delight, says the Lord. So step one of confidence, know God. If you know who God is, you understand his might, and you understand that he is the King of Kings. But then you very quickly understand you are a child of God. You are his heir. He has given you all of his delight. So to live confidently in life, you really have to understand that. So people who know this, they walk confidently in life. So if you don't know who you are, and you don't know where you come from, then how can you live confidently? If you're constantly questioning, who am I? What's my worth? What's my purpose? If I'm anchoring my identity in everything that is loose and fickle and not anchored in something that is complete, then of course we're always going to struggle. So step one, and a very clear step one, know God. Step two is building each other up. Where I linked earlier the people who struggle with kind of false humility, or the ability to have criticism as being pride, confident people build other people up. Because there is no competition. There is no need to prove oneself. And the definition I gave you earlier about how pride is loud and confidence is quiet. If you know and you are confident in your abilities, in yourself, there's not really a need to put other people down. Quite the opposite. You find every opportunity to build them up. So let nothing be done through selfish ambition or conceit, but in lowliness of mind, let each esteem other better than himself. Let each of you look out not only for his own interests, but also for the interests of others. And this idea of esteem others better than himself, it's not even that you're actually confident in yourself, you're also putting other people in front of you. I'll put that in the work context. If you actually give other people the credit, even if you've done the work, controversial. But imagine the type of culture and things, people that you build around you. If they know that this is somebody who's got their back, who will actually help them, who will build them up. It's a really beautiful feeling. And you see that in very good management or people who are very senior, who know how to do their job well and are confident. You can feel it when they walk in the room. They never have a purpose to want to put anybody down for any reason. It just doesn't really come up. Use of talents. Confident people don't only use their talents, they also multiply them. So having then gifts differing according to the grace that is given to us, let us use them. If prophecy, let us prophesy in proportion to our faith. Or ministry, let us use it in our ministering. He who teaches in teaching, he who exhorts in exhortation, he who gives with liberality, he who leads with diligence, and he who shows with mercy and cheerfulness. So sometimes people say, yeah, but I don't know what my talents are. Fair enough. I think pray about that to begin with. But I would also say, ask others around you. Sometimes we have blind spots, but other people see things in us that we don't see in ourselves. So if you're questioning or in doubt, then just ask and see what happens. But pray and ask ultimately that God reveals it to you. But what you shouldn't do is bury them. The idea of multiplying your talents, like that's a calling. And the parable of the stewards were the ones who buried them as opposed to the ones who multiplied them. Like, this is how we should think about the gifts that God has given us. Never with the perspective that I am the one who did all of those things. It's that God gave me the gift and I need to use it for his glory. And his glory means every day. It doesn't just mean in certain parts of my life or when I serve or when I'm with my family. It means in every single part of your life. Use those gifts. Find the opportunity to use them. Find the opportunity to multiply them. Again, we all have a beautiful calling, and we are lucky to have a God that tells us his promises that we can live in that. So to not then use the things that he's given us, like that's not very kind. So multiply them and do it with confidence, knowing that he's given that to you. I think equally, confident people are very good at being calm in trials and tribulations. They're very assured. So, though an army may encamp against me, my heart shall not fear. The war may rise against me, in this I will be confident. This is a difficult one for me personally, Because I think when we face problems or troubles, it's very easy to not trust and not to have confidence and to feel weak or in despair or vulnerable or like you're struggling. And there is a world where we're promised that God will cover us. He will be the one who gives us confidence because we are not fearful. And I think that's a beautiful thing to aspire to, that regardless of the circumstances or regardless of what happens to me in life, I'm going to live with a confidence to know that it's all going to be okay. And I don't know if you know that phrase where it says, everything's all right in the end, and if it's not all right, it's not the end. I think we can really apply a spiritual angle to that. Because hopefully the end is our salvation. So everything in between doesn't really matter. Because ultimately, that's the truth. Like, everything will be all right. Because regardless of what happens, it's not the end. So we're all sojourners here. We're passing by. For everything that happens to us to exist with that confidence, I think life has a very different flavor. It doesn't become the thing that controls you, but something that you pass through because you know at some point it will end and there is salvation for us. And again, that's the comfort and the peace that we live in as Christians. And there's so much peace in that. And that's also something we should be sharing with others. And I think this sums it up nicely. And I just really like this verse. I always like this verse because I'm pretty sure this is my verse for the year. But it says in James, "Brethren, count it all joy when you fall into various trials, knowing that the testing of your faith produces patience. But let patience have its perfect work, that you may be perfect and complete, lacking nothing." So confidence for me is when you're going through tribulations, you're counting it as joy. Crazy. Like the idea of being joyful in the moments of tribulations, because what it's actually doing is allowing patience have its perfect work in you. Literally making you complete and lacking nothing. So instead of every time you have a problem, you think, oh my goodness, it's the end of the world. You actually say, this is God perfecting me. He is going to put me in a position where I lack nothing. You look at it completely differently. You take a step back and you breathe and you say, okay, God, have your perfect work. But give me the patience to endure it. You can also pray about it, because that's not something that comes easy. Any questions or thoughts or reflections from what I've said? Because I know I've been talking a lot, so. Please.
This sounds strange, but what if you cause the trial, like you do something that causes the issue? Should you still have that mindset, like, no, I should be joyous in this moment because it's going to sanctify me?
I think that's definitely an interesting question. Abuna, do you have thoughts?
What if you cause the problem or kind of trigger the trial, but you reflect on it, and then should your mindset be, I should be joyous in this moment because this is going to sanctify me?
It's a great question. I'm going to pass it on. This is so great about being a speaker. You just hand everything over.
Not even
to
an attempt. So in one sense, you can see that we're always triggering problems for ourselves. We're always putting ourselves in these situations where we walk into the lion's den all the time, okay? And then we try to solve, or we try to find a way to solve it our own way, and then when nothing happens and all the doors are closed, what do we do then? God, come help. Or, even before God, come help, God, where are you? Why have you left me all this time like this? Okay? And then we try to make sense of it. The one thing that we have to be sure of is what God will allow and will not allow. So even if I do something, God will allow it because there is always a benefit for me. There is a beautiful saying, I think by Saint Augustine. He says, God will not allow for any evil to come upon you if he will not turn it to your good. God will not allow for any evil to come upon you if he will not turn it for your good. So even if I do something, and I always take those silly decisions, and I do silly things, but if I then go back and, like a small child, hold on to my father, I tell him, okay, I've messed up, guide me, tell me what I should be doing here. Be open to the learning. Be open to what God wants to tell you. Be open to why God allowed this to happen in the first place. If you can be joyous, amazing. You're like, I need to see the halo next time I see you.
It's hard.
No, I'm joking. I always see the halo in Mary Mag. But no, it is a level of, if you can be joyous, and this is being fully confident that he will resolve it. Even if I mess it up, he will resolve it. And that's absolutely, if we can attain this, that will be heaven. But yeah, it's a beautiful question. Do you have a
Very
follow-up? No, you can, but to Tina.
I was going to add one comment because St. Augustine is one of my favorite saints. And actually, he had a prayer, it's quite a controversial one. But he says, Lord, make me pure, but not yet. And this was when he was transitioning from kind of his worldly life to his saintly life. And he was struggling so much with his sin, and he had plenty. If you've never read it, Confessions of St. Augustine, it's a dense book, but it's beautiful. And the idea that he was constantly making mistakes. And not only that, but he actually loved his sin at that moment in time. And he was fighting with himself to say, God, I want you to take this away from me. But at the same time, he was enjoying it, which is a very strange dichotomy. But then you see how he used him and how he became one of the biggest saints of of that time. And the way that he gave up his whole life to then follow God. It's a beautiful story. But I think it also reminds you that saints are humans. The way we think of them sometimes is it's untouchable. You're going to make the mistakes. But yeah, learn with them with joy. So, who's this guy? Not the big one, the little one. There you go. That's David. Why did I use David as my example, and not because of one of David's here? But also he picked a very good name. Why is David a good example? Yeah. He went against a giant. And everyone's like, what are you doing? And he's like, God's got this. Without a blink of an eye. He just literally did not hesitate. But I think also David was a very humble man. And he was a man after God's own heart. And even though he had so many glories, he always gave it back to God. He was essentially the antithesis of Saul. He was never looking for praise. He was always following his commandments. He had bravery and courage that is commendable for being shepherd to then becoming king. And the victories that he achieved, it's powerful. But also a beautiful example of how God uses you when you really trust him and lean on him and give your heart to him. He's really a great example. And I'm sure if you all spend time reading, I know everybody knows the story of Goliath because it's the most popular one, but there's a lot of richness behind who he was and what he did. But as an example of what confidence looks like, I think there's not as many. I have many in my mind, like Esther. I think she's phenomenal as well. For a women shout out. She's brilliant and also somebody who had a lot of confidence in God, even though at the time there wasn't any reason and she was going against the Israelites. There was a lot of things that she was struggling with, but she went against who the king was at the time and actually asked him to forgive her people, which they did. So, plenty of examples, but I thought this was a beautiful one to kind of keep just because of the soul comparison. So there's not many slides left, but I think this is really just the question of how do we have this. I know often we talk about these things, but it always comes back to practicalities. This is really simple verse, and I'm sure again you all have seen and read it many times. But trusting in the Lord with all your heart, not a small part of it, but all of it. So we're not going to do some bits I trust God and other bits I don't. It's everything. And that's the smallest decision in your day to the biggest choices that you make. You have to trust him. And the thing I struggle with is not to lean on your own understanding, but to lean on his own will. And in all your ways, acknowledge him, and he directs your path. So it's really simple. Just trust him. And I know I say that facetiously because that's really difficult to do. But I think the emphasis on the idea, it's all your heart, it's all your ways. It's not some, it's not in this area, it's not the places I want to, it's everything. I think living a life of service really teaches us that. I think it's much easier for us to continue life only serving maybe ourselves or even the people that we love. But I think using every opportunity in your life as a concept of service, I think that definitely helps. So, but he who is greatest among you shall be your servant. And I think this is the idea of living a humble life. And I was listening to a sermon and it was saying the route to confidence is through humility. And it sounds counterintuitive, but it's not. Because a humble heart is a malleable heart, and a heart that also knows God's power. And if you know God's power, then you live very confidently. So it's not instinctive to think of it in that way, but it is definitely the way you get there. And I really like this verse, well, not verse, sorry, saying, although there is contention about who it's attributed to, but I'm going to stick to what's the majority, which is C.S. Lewis, where he said, humility is not thinking less of yourself, but thinking of yourself less. And as a concept of even serving others, that's how you should think about it. I'm not here because it's not that I think less of myself or I'm less worthy, because I'm not. I'm a child of God. I am extremely worthy. It's that I don't spend all of my time thinking about me and my needs. I think about everybody else around me. The fact that he's given us a spirit of fear, not of fear, but of power and of love and of a self-discipline. Like, this is the Holy Spirit that sits in us. That's the Spirit. It's power, it's love, it's self-discipline. It's not fearful, it's not weak. It comes with gravitas, that's knowing God. And that lives inside of us. So let's move aside this false humility point. Like, that's the power we live with. As long as you know who the source of power is. And it's not yourself, it's him. If that conviction is there, you are a force, an unstoppable one. But we have to believe that. And if we don't believe that, then how can we expect others? And people will see that in you. You don't need to say anything. It shows up by itself. The outcome? Blessed is a man who walks not in the counsel of the ungodly, nor stands in the path of sinners, nor sits in the seat of the scornful. All the prideful things we just discussed. But his delight is in the law of the Lord. Delight being enjoyment, savoring, like true love. And his law he meditates day and night. He shall be like a tree planted by the rivers of the water, that brings forth its fruits in its season, whose leaf shall also not wither, and whatever he does shall prosper. That's how our lives will look like if we lived in true confidence. And I love the imagery of a tree planted by the rivers of water, because they're strong and they're deep-rooted and they always have life. And that source of life and water is who? But God himself. Thank you. Any more questions, please Abuna David will take them all gladly. But genuinely, any questions?